My in-laws completely mocked me when I cried at my daughter's birthday after losing my job. They whispered, "Guess he'll ask for money again." A few years later, they walked into a gala dinner only to realize I was the host honored for donating $10 million to children's charities. The look on their faces was priceless. Last weekend, Daniel, my husband, and I were having coffee on our back porch when he handed me an envelope. It was from his parents, Robert and Elaine. "They want to meet," Daniel said carefully. I just stared at him. "Now? After everything?" He shrugged, looking just as conflicted. "They say they want to rebuild the relationship." I let out a quiet laugh, more tired than angry. It's amazing how family finds you once they realize you're not struggling anymore. Daniel didn't argue. He just reached for my hand across the table, squeezing it lightly. Neither of us said much after that. The morning sun warmed our faces as we sat there, both knowing the weight of the history between us. And that's where I guess I should start this story. The real beginning was 8 years ago, right here in Asheville, North Carolina. At the time, Daniel and I were living in a small 2-bedroom home with our daughter, Sophie, who had just turned 6. Daniel was working as a middle school science teacher. I was holding on to my job at a boutique marketing firm downtown, a job I loved, even though the pay was modest. We were proud of our life. We didn't have country club memberships or European vacations, but we had a cozy house, a beautiful little girl who loved ballet, and enough to get by. And we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. The sore spot was Daniel's parents, Robert and Elaine. They had never approved of me. To them, I wasn't polished enough, not from the right kind of family. Their world was cocktail parties, charity auctions, and silent expectations. Mine was Sunday potlucks, hand-me-down clothes, and hard work. From the very beginning, they made sure I knew where I stood. I wasn't rude or confrontational back then. I thought that if I just tried harder, smiled wider, baked better pies for their dinners, dressed a little nicer, they'd eventually come around. They didn't. Their comments were always disguised as politeness. "Oh, Hannah, you're so genuine. Not like the women we usually know." Or, "Daniel always did have a taste for the simpler things." It stung, but I brushed it off. For Daniel. For Sophie. Then, the real blow came. 1 week before Sophie's 7th birthday, I was laid off. The marketing firm I worked for had lost several major clients and had to make cuts. I was one of the first to go. I remember sitting in my car outside the office after they told me, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. It wasn't just a job loss. It was a piece of my identity being ripped away. Daniel was supportive, as always. "We'll get through this," he said, wrapping his arms around me that night. And I believed him. Sophie's birthday was supposed to be a happy distraction. We threw a simple backyard party, pink balloons, a princess cake I spent hours decorating myself, folding chairs for the adults, and plenty of bubbles for the kids. I plastered on a smile and kept moving, making sure everyone had enough to eat, enough to drink, enough to keep busy. But at one point, when I went into the kitchen to grab more lemonade, it all just broke. I leaned against the counter, the cheap vinyl cool against my back, and tried to breathe. Instead, tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I wasn't sobbing, just leaking sadness. That's when I heard them. Robert's low chuckle. "Guess he'll be asking for money again." Elaine's laughter followed. Pathetic. Maybe if he'd married someone better suited, he wouldn't be in this position. I froze. They didn't know I was there, just around the corner. I stood perfectly still, like prey hoping the predators wouldn't notice me. It wasn't just the cruelty of what they said. It was the casualness. Like it was a fact of life, as normal as commenting on the weather. I wiped my face quickly and grabbed the lemonade, walking back out into the sunshine, smiling like my world hadn't just cracked wide open. Later that night, I told Daniel what happened. He was furious, but when he confronted them, they brushed it off. Misunderstanding, they said. You're too sensitive, Elaine insisted, waving her manicured hand like swatting away an annoying fly. But I wasn't imagining it. I knew exactly what I heard. From that day forward, something inside me hardened. I didn't tell them about my job hunts. I didn't invite them to family dinners. I kept them at polite arm's length, for Sophie's sake more than mine. Meanwhile, necessity forced me to get creative. I started freelancing, writing ad copy, doing social media campaigns, even helping small businesses in town set up their online presence. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on. Slowly, I realized something: I was good at this. Not just good, exceptional. Within 2 years, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I started my own marketing consulting firm, focusing on helping brick-and-mortar businesses transition online. I hired a few remote workers, invested every extra penny back into the business, and pushed harder than I ever thought I could. While Robert and Elaine continued living in their world of charity brunches and faux politeness, I was quietly building an empire. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. At a conference in Atlanta, I met Meredith, a venture capitalist looking to invest in digital startups. She liked my scrappy energy and saw the potential in what I was doing. She offered me a partnership deal, expand nationwide, and she'd fund it. It was terrifying. And exhilarating. I said yes. Within 3 years, my firm was operating in 15 states. Our revenue numbers were staggering. Sophie was thriving in her ballet academy. Daniel was teaching part-time and painting full-time. We bought a beautiful new home with space for all of us to breathe. I never once thought to brag to Robert and Elaine. I didn't need their validation anymore. Last month, everything came full circle. My friend Lisa, who runs a children's health nonprofit in Asheville, asked if I would be willing to sponsor their annual gala. They had lost a major donor unexpectedly, and the programs for vulnerable children were at risk. Without hesitation, I agreed. Not just to sponsor, to donate $10 million. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because no child should suffer because adults failed them. Still, the night of the gala at the Biltmore estate was a dream. Daniel and I arrived quietly. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy. We took our seats without fanfare. Originally, I asked Lisa to keep my donation anonymous. I didn't want the night to be about me. But just before the event started, Lisa approached me, glowing with excitement. Hannah, please, let me announce it. People need to know what you've done. I hesitated for a moment, then thought back to that night in my kitchen. To Robert's laughter. To Elaine's disdain. I smiled and nodded. Okay. 15 minutes later, Lisa took the stage, microphone in hand. Tonight, we are beyond honored to introduce the largest donor in our history, a woman whose generosity has changed thousands of lives. Please welcome Hannah Blake. The applause was deafening. I stood slowly, feeling dozens of eyes turn toward me. And then I saw them. Robert and Elaine. Sitting right near the front, perfectly positioned under the massive gold chandelier. Their faces. I'll never forget it. Elaine's hand fluttered up to her pearls. Robert's jaw tightened. Both looked like they had swallowed a lemon. I didn't wave. I didn't smirk. I just walked calmly to the stage. The speeches that followed blurred together. People clapped, people cried. I shook hands and hugged strangers. But every time I caught a glimpse of them out of the corner of my eye, I felt lighter. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need anything from them. They slipped out quietly before dessert, heads down, as if leaving a funeral. It was poetic, in a way. After that night at the gala, I didn't think much more about Robert and Elaine. Life had a momentum of its own. Sophie was preparing for her biggest recital of the year. Daniel had an upcoming gallery showing of his paintings. My firm had just landed 2 major corporate contracts, and I was flying out to Austin and Denver in back-to-back weeks to oversee the onboarding. I was busy, the good kind of busy. The kind where you fall into bed at night exhausted but satisfied. So when Daniel handed me that envelope on the back porch, it felt like an interruption to a life they were no longer a part of. "They want to meet," he said again, as if repeating it would make it less absurd. I set my coffee down and took the letter. It was written in Robert's stiff, formal handwriting. They wanted to reconnect as a family, to bridge the gaps that have formed, and move forward together with love and mutual respect. The irony nearly made me laugh. 8 years of silence, condescension, and cruelty, and now, because they finally saw me on a stage where they couldn't ignore me, they wanted to play happy families. I didn't respond right away. I tucked the letter into a book on the coffee table and tried to forget about it. But it kept creeping into my mind at odd moments. When I watched Sophie practice her pirouettes in the living room. When I packed my suitcase for Austin. When I laid awake some nights staring at the ceiling, feeling that old hurt rise up like a bruise being pressed. They had humiliated me when I was at my lowest. And they had never once apologized. I didn't need an apology to live my life. I had built a family without their approval. A business without their help. A life filled with pride and peace. But the thought of seeing them again, sitting across a polished table, sipping tea, pretending the past hadn't happened, made my stomach turn. Still, part of me wondered if refusing outright made me petty. Was it wrong to deny Daniel the chance to fix things with his parents, even if I couldn't? Daniel, to his credit, never pressured me. "It's your call," he said one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. "You don't owe them anything." "You never did." I nodded, grateful for him in ways I could barely express. He had chosen me, even when it made things harder for him with his family. That mattered. A week passed without me answering the letter. Then the phone call started. First it was a missed call from a number I didn't recognize, Elaine's cell, I later realized. Then a polite voicemail from Robert, stiff and formal, inviting us to brunch at their club. Just the family, to catch up and reconnect. I didn't return the call. 2 days later, Daniel got a text, from Elaine, no less. "We're hosting a small dinner Sunday evening. Would love for you, Hannah, and Sophie to join. Hope we can all move forward with love." Daniel showed me the message without comment. I stared at it for a long moment, then just shook my head. They hadn't changed. They weren't reaching out because they missed us. They were reaching out because now, I was useful. Now, I could offer them something they valued, prestige, association, maybe even financial help if they thought they could spin it the right way. It wasn't about family. It was about optics. I thought about Sophie, too. She barely knew her grandparents. They showed up at her early birthdays out of obligation, not affection. They never attended her recitals. Never sent her a birthday card or a Christmas gift unless Daniel reminded them. Did she really need them in her life now? The answer came quietly, but firmly, inside me, no. Still, the part of me that hated confrontation hesitated. Was I being too harsh? Was there a path forward that didn't involve burning bridges, even if those bridges had been falling apart for years? Daniel must have sensed my struggle. That night, after we tucked Sophie into bed, he pulled me onto the couch and wrapped his arms around me. "We don't owe them access to our lives just because they're suddenly interested," he said, voice low against my hair. "They had years to be decent people." I closed my eyes and let the words settle over me like a bomb. He was right. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up for you when you're down. It's who sees you cry at a kitchen counter and doesn't mock you for it. It's who builds you up, not tears you down when you're at your weakest. And Robert and Elaine had shown me exactly what kind of family they were a long time ago. Days went by. The invitations became more insistent. Brunch. Dinner. A charity golf tournament they were hosting. Finally, they sent a long email, addressed to both Daniel and me, dripping with performative regret. Elaine mentioned how proud they were of my success in the business world and how they look forward to hearing all about your ventures over lunch. There it was. Barely veiled. They wanted to show me off like a prize they had supported, as if my achievements reflected well on them. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted a photo op. I didn't respond. Neither did Daniel. We both knew we had built something real, something stronger than the flimsy illusion of approval they now dangled before us. As the weeks went by, their invitations turned from polite to persistent. Daniel and I said nothing. We didn't respond to their emails, their texts, their phone calls. We simply lived our lives, and they were good lives. Meanwhile, the gala buzz hadn't died down. Articles popped up in local papers and online. Philanthropist Hannah Blake donates $10 million to Asheville Children's Healthcare Initiative, one headline read. Another, small-town entrepreneur becomes local hero. Everywhere I went, the grocery store, Sophie's ballet studio, even coffee shops, people stopped me to say thank you, to congratulate me, to shake my hand. It wasn't fame I wanted. It was connection. Genuine connection. The kind Robert and Elaine had never offered. And it became clear that the more attention I received, the more desperate they became. Finally, about 2 months after the gala, I received an invitation by courier, hand-delivered to my office, for a private luncheon being held at the Biltmore Country Club. A quick glance showed it was a charity event organized by Elaine herself. And written in perfect script at the bottom. Guest of honor, Mrs. Hannah Blake. Without ever asking me. They were using my name to lend credibility to their event. To draw attention. To make themselves look good. It was the final straw. I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the ornate invitation in my hands, feeling that familiar mixture of anger and sadness rise up again. They still didn't see me. They only saw what I could do for them. Daniel and I talked it over that night. I showed him the invitation. He read it, face darkening, then slid it across the table. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "I think it's time to remind them who they're dealing with," I said quietly. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I made a few phone calls. I reached out to Lisa, who still had contacts from the gala. I connected with a few reporters who had covered my donation. And 2 weeks later, just a few days before Elaine's luncheon, an interview dropped, one I had agreed to give, knowing exactly what I wanted to say. It was a simple piece. Just me, sitting in a sun-drenched room, talking about why I gave to children's charities. About how I believed in lifting up the overlooked. About how community meant everything to me. About how success wasn't about who you impressed, it was about who you helped. No bitterness. No anger. Just truth. But at the end, the interviewer asked, gently, if I had always felt supported in my journey. I paused. Then said, simply, there were people who tried to make me feel small. People who laughed when I was at my lowest. I'm grateful for them now. They taught me that real family is about love, not blood. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. The story went modestly viral, at least within our community. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The day of Elaine's luncheon arrived. I had RSVP'd, politely declining the invitation. But I had arranged a small surprise. As the guests filed into the grand hall of the country club, the buzz was immediate. People had seen the interview. They had connected the dots. I wasn't there to be paraded around like a trophy. Instead, I had sent a representative from my foundation, a young woman named Mia, who had once been one of the children the charity helped. Mia stood proudly at the podium Elaine had prepared for me, smiling brightly as she spoke. "I'm honored to be here today on behalf of Mrs. Hannah Blake, who unfortunately couldn't attend. But she wanted me to pass along her deepest thanks, and remind us all that true giving has no strings attached, and no need for appearances." The room fell utterly silent. According to friends who were there, Elaine's face went pale. Robert looked like he might actually choke on his club sandwich. People whispered. People noticed. The narrative they had tried to spin, that they were close with me, that they had somehow been part of my success, collapsed right there, under the weight of their own arrogance. After that, the calls and letters stopped. No more invitations. No more desperate brunch requests. Just silence, the kind that finally felt peaceful. As for me, life kept moving forward. Sophie danced her heart out at her recital, earning a scholarship to a prestigious ballet summer camp. Daniel's painting started selling at local galleries. My company expanded into 2 more states. And on quiet mornings, sitting on the back porch with my coffee, I thought about everything that had happened. How they tried to tear me down. How they laughed at my tears. How they had to watch, powerless, as I built a life they couldn't touch. Revenge hadn't come with screaming matches or slammed doors. It had come with success. With dignity. With the simple, undeniable fact that I no longer needed them, but they desperately needed me. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest victory of all.